With the moon is literally woven into our art and our psyche. Just take these iconic lyrics from Pink Floyd. It's fascinating when you realize the very word lunatic actually derives from the Latin word for moon, luna. It highlights this age-old assumption that the moon somehow pulls at the human mind, just like it pulls at the ocean's tides. It's an absolute fixture in our cultural consciousness, an ever-present symbol of the unknown sitting right there on our cosmic doorstep.
All right, let's kick things off with Act 1, the light. We're going to dive right into the cold, hard, scientific reality. To really appreciate the mysteries of the moon, we first need to ground ourselves in the established facts. To give you a quick spatial comparison, if the Earth were the size of a standard nickel, the moon would be about the size of a green pea. Now, there is a super common myth out there that the moon doesn't rotate. It actually does, but it rotates at a rate that perfectly matches its orbit, meaning it only ever shows us one face. And structurally, it is surprisingly lopsided. Its crust has a thickness of about 43 miles on the near-side hemisphere, the one we see, but it bulks up to a massive 93 miles thick on the far side.
So it's sitting out there at an average distance of about 239,000 miles away from us, and it possesses only a tiny, faint exosphere rather than a true atmosphere. But here's a wild little fact. It isn't staying put. The moon is actually steadily moving away from our planet at a rate of about 1 inch every single year.
So how did that giant space peak get there in the first place? Well, astrophysicists generally point to 4 models of lunar formation. You have the capture theory, which suggests it was a wandering body, kind of like an asteroid that just got caught by Earth's gravity. The accretion hypothesis argues it formed right alongside Earth from the very beginning. Then there's the fission theory, which proposes a rapidly spinning early Earth literally flung off material. But the giant impact theory, that is the most widely accepted one today, proposing that the moon formed from the debris of a massive collision between Earth and a Mars-sized planet.
But standard astrophysics only gets us so far. That brings us to Act 2, the shadows. This is where we get into the anomalies and the flat-out oddities. As we shift from standard expectations to data that kind of defies them, the tone gets a lot more mysterious. Take the physical oddity of lunar craters, for instance. The massive Aitken crater measures an astounding 1,240 miles wide. But despite massive differences in width across the moon, from tiny impacts to gargantuan ones like Aitken, these craters are all surprisingly similar in depth. It's a huge anomaly. It actually caused NASA's drills to have a notoriously hard time penetrating the lunar surface, almost as if there's a uniform, impenetrable shield sitting right beneath the dust.
And the surface itself? It is an incredibly extreme, unforgiving environment. When the moon is in full direct sunlight, temperatures absolutely skyrocket, reaching a blistering 260 degrees Fahrenheit.
But the moment you step into the darkness, it is a completely different world. Temperatures plummet into the freezing depths of negative 280 degrees. And it's actually within these freezing, shadowed extremes that both Indian and American space agencies have detected water, sitting there mostly in a crystallized frozen state. Now things get genuinely puzzling when we look at the actual pieces of the moon we've brought back home. Apollo moon rocks and lunar rovers revealed elements that outright challenge our standard geological models. They found elements like uranium-236 and neptunium-237, heavy metals that are highly unusual for natural formation. Add to that slightly magnetized rocks and China's Chang'e 4 probe discovering this bizarre gel-like substance, and the moon starts looking a whole lot less like a simple rock.
And then there's this number, and it is a staggering one, 2.4 quadrillion. That represents the tons of an unknown, incredibly dense metal mass discovered buried deep at the moon's south pole. We're talking about a massive chunk of material sitting beneath the surface that our standard formation theories really struggle to completely account for. Which brings us to probably the most famous lunar anomaly of all. NASA actually placed a seismometer on the moon and deliberately let part of a rocket slam into the surface. And the result? The moon rang like a bell for a little over an hour. A second impact later caused it to ring for 3 whole hours. On Earth, seismic waves dampen really quickly because of water and heat. But the moon's reverberations indicated a shocking lack of density, which sparked a ton of scientific and popular speculation about potential hollow characteristics inside our satellite.
And its behavior in space? Just as strange. Most moons in our solar system orbit right above their host planet's equator. Our moon absolutely doesn't. It follows the planetary ecliptic, which is the exact same path the planets use around the sun. Even stranger, it doesn't orbit our planet's exact center, but a magic spot about 1,000 miles beneath Earth's surface. And it's the only known body that moves through space at exactly its own diameter, 2,160 miles every single hour.
It really begs you to consider why our moon behaves quite unlike any other observed satellite out there. Which brings us to our final section, Act 3, the sacred. Let's look at astro-theology and eschatology.
All these anomalies kind of force the question, why did this specific rock become the central figure of universal human worship and profound prophecy? Across the ancient Near East, tribes completely synchronized their cultures with lunar cycles. The Amorites, for example, worshiped the moon as the deity Yaruk. They didn't just casually observe it, they built their entire spiritual lives around its phases.
And this wasn't just a localized thing either. In Sumerian culture, the moon wasn't just tracked, it was revered as the god Nana, or Sin. They meticulously deified its light, assigning different names and representations to its varying phases. It spread across vast, totally disconnected empires, from the Akkadians to the distant Aztecs. The moon was consistently anthropomorphized. Over in Egypt, it was associated with the deity Thoth, representing wisdom and writing. Depending on the culture you're looking at, lunar deities were worshipped as gods of farming, fertility, and sometimes even warrior gods, which just shows how absolutely essential the moon's seasonal cycles were to ancient survival. The Moabites worshipped it under the name Kamash. But what's really fascinating here is how biblical texts respond to this universal lunar obsession. Books like Jeremiah and Zephaniah frame God as being fiercely angry with the worship of the moon. And it wasn't just for bowing to a dead rock, it was for syncretizing spirituality with the supposed spiritual entities or messengers that people assigned to it.
Now, if we look at the biblical creation account in Genesis 1, we find a really striking textural oddity. Fundamental light, which could include both the visible and invisible spectrums, is created on day 1. However, the moon and the sun are not actually fashioned until day 4. The text specifies they're placed there later specifically to serve as signs, and for seasons and for days and years. So it deliberately positions the moon not as a god, but as a carefully calibrated cosmic timepiece.
So how exactly was that timepiece used? Well, in ancient Israel, the start of the 7th month, the month of Tishri, began with the new moon cycle. This was known as Yom Teruah, or the hidden day, because the exact moment of the new moon was obscured. It actually required at least 2 witnesses to visually confirm the sliver of the moon before the high priest would finally blow the trumpets, sounding an alarm and signaling a crucial time of introspection and repentance.
These ancient Levitical practices basically served as a prophetic blueprint. The hidden start of the new moon ties directly into the eschatological concept of a day no man knows. 2 witnesses confirm the event, the trumpets sound a warning, and that leads up to the 10th day, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement where the Book of Life is sealed, and ultimately, the 11th day, representing final judgment. The moon's cycles were seen as literal, physical reminders of spiritual rebirth, forgiveness, and impending judgment.
Which leaves us looking toward the ultimate destiny of our mysterious satellite. In the apocalyptic imagery of biblical texts like Joel and Revelation, the moon is prophesied to turn to blood and eventually fade away entirely, no longer needed for light in a new eternal state. So whether you view the moon as a marvel of astrophysics, a collection of bizarre geological anomalies, or a sacred timepiece ticking down to the end of an age, it forces all of us to ask, what does this silent watcher in the sky ultimately signify for humanity's future?